Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, September 20th, 2016. Time for another show, regardless of what you may prefer to do. Michael Musson, like me, has mostly missed Talk Like a Pirate Day. Again, we mentioned it yesterday. This is becoming like it's arbitrary. I guess it's actually the same time each year, and time is just passing that much faster. But okay. Well, I'm sure we'll get them next year, Michael. We'll be looking out for it. Really, I think we should be talking like a pirate now, rather than waiting for our once-a-year opportunity. Everyone else is talking like a pirate year-round anyway. Okay, let's see what's dominating the news today. I don't know whether it's really the case that that Twitter is afire the way it was last night with Donald Trump Jr.'s tweet of a recycled, rehashed, racist meme. Surprise! Somebody mentioned last night, you really have to work hard to get yourself known as the dumb Trump. but he's really working hard on doing that. Of course, you will have seen it by now. The ridiculous assertion that, the ridiculous assertion that there's any reason to be talking about Syrian refugees at the moment in particular, other than, oh my God, there's a bazillion Syrian refugees and we have to do something to help. But note that it was retweeted with a wink and a nod, the idea, of course, being that the U.S. citizen of Afghan extraction, who is said to be the suspect behind the bombings in New York and New Jersey, New York, really, if you want to get technical about it. And of course, the problem is, sure, there may be lots of terrific refugees, really super duper people, but some of them will kill you, of course. He's not Syrian, but you're not supposed to sort that out for yourself. And of course, it took everybody about 2 seconds to realize this is applicable to everything, because there's risk in everything. If you give me a bowl full of responsible gun owners and tell me only 3 will suddenly become not responsible gun owners and maybe shoot up a mall or a theater, would you allow people to have the guns? Yeah, you kind of would have to, because that's what risk is all about. If you told me just all it takes is one Trump to start a nuclear war and kill all life on the planet, what can you do? You still have to have an election. Despite the fact that we think the risk is a little too high. Justice, of course, has kept an eye on things technically for us for the last few minutes, making sure everything starts smoothly, but he's been watching the Skittles. I don't know. It's not really a controversy. It's just nonsense. But he tells me levels are, in radio jargon, 5 by 5, but 3 of the Skittles are poison, so watch out for that. And reminds me of a tweet he made, I guess, last night on this subject. I think we should just stop manufacturing Skittles until we can figure out what the hell's going on. They actually did go ahead. Somebody said, hey, the Skittles people probably, whoever it is that makes it, and I think, is it M&M Mars that makes those things? I thought somebody mentioned that last night. I didn't look it up. I don't really care who makes Skittles. And by the way, yeah, if you didn't remember, we'll just remind you that the Skittles thing is supposed to be a wink about the Trayvon Martin shooting, of course. And if you missed that, I'm happy to remind you of it. But yeah, there we are with this thing. And I don't know. I guess it's dying down a little bit, thankfully. It's just an amazing thing that a candidate's grown son is willing to send these things out. And I don't know, Eric doesn't seem to be quite as enthusiastic about retweeting these stupid memes. All right, well, let's see. And maybe on a more upbeat note, we'll remind you that Bill starts us off with a morning tweet each morning. We might as well tell you now, Daily Kos Radio is live. It's a little late to tell you that, but Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. I ought to announce that once in a while. Reveals his surefire tips for preventing you from jumping into a live volcano. I forgot that part. I just said jumping into a volcano. Really, jumping into any volcano, live or otherwise, is probably a terrible idea. Not so much because lava as jumping into, well, okay, don't jump into any volcanoes. That's the main goal of the show, is to keep you happy enough or intrigued enough to wonder what's going to happen. What are we going to talk about the next day? And you'll miss it if you jump into a volcano. Not everyone has the opportunity to jump into a volcano. Probably, well, you know, Judy more than than any of the rest of you. If you're living in Hawaii, definitely want to keep you guys happy. Make sure you're not wandering around any volcanoes. If you're listening in Iceland, likely the big pressure is off of you because Donald Trump won't be your president. But again, we might end up killing you too. So do keep an eye on our elections and make sure we don't do anything too crazy. The fate of the planet, what can I tell you, is really hangs in the balance. Anyway, so there's plenty more. There's actual news we'll catch up on. There's actual analysis of policy issues in case that has to enter into the discussion. We have the Washington Post on that front analyzing Donald Trump's tax plan. I guess he actually released it, unlike the taxes themselves. And of course, one of the reasons that you release your taxes, aside from figuring out how many conflicts of interest you might have or where you get your money from or where your interests may lie, is then we can see, well, what would your tax plan do to your taxes? One of the minimum basic functions of releasing both your taxes and a tax plan. Everyone can see, are you cutting your own taxes at everyone else's expense? We can't tell for sure, of course, because we don't have the tax returns, but it's fairly certain that, well, the analysis certainly tells us the top 1% of earners, or rather, the top 1% of people who siphon money off of the economy anyway, in one way or another, end up with the vast majority of the benefits under Trump's plan. No surprise. The only surprise is that we can't say exactly what the dollar figure is going to be for him because he won't tell us how much he earns and where he gets it and what deductions he takes. Okay, so we're basically back where we started the day before, with one less day until the election. Good a time as any to bring Greg Dworkin in and tell us how it's going and how it might go between now and then. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. So let's finish up this Skittles thing and get it done so we don't have to do it again.
All right.
So the exact tweet from Donald Trump Jr., one of the children of the corn, was, if I had a bowl of Skittles and I told you just 3 would kill you, would you take a handful? That's our Syrian refugee problem. Trump, Pence, make America great again. And Skittles tweeted back, Skittles are candy, refugees are people.
Oh, well, they're right about that. And
They
by
are.
the way, the way that's written, the answer is take 2 Skittles. They
Right.
need some punctuation in there.
Exactly. And I thought actually that was pretty good.
Yeah.
So there's a very interesting piece here from Clara Jeffrey. Clara Jeffrey is the editor-in-chief at Mother Jones.
Oh, yes.
And she has a short personal tweet story to tell, which is over in Storify. I Storified it for her. Clara Jeffrey with a personal tale of refugees, compassion, and Skittles. After the Cambodian genocide began, my mom, she says, started taping pictures and headlines to our dining room wall. Mrs. Paul's fish sticks and pictures of the killing fields is how I remember those meals. We have to do something, she said.
Okay.
Clara was about 9 at the time. So Clara's mom started sponsoring refugees. We were clueless white people. There was no real pre-existing Cambodian community in D.C. Metro. Our first sponsor's husband and baby had been killed. She lived with us for about 2 years, nobody to talk to in her own language. Many followed. Horrible stories. One toddler had a crease across his nose from a bullet, mass graves, rapes. They'd endured unspeakable trauma. They came to a country where even the open-hearted were blinkered and powerless. The trauma took its toll on them. Some, in more obvious ways, took its toll on my family, too. Scars to us persist, but we were better off for what they showed us about the capacity for healing. And they mostly did fine, do outstanding. Now, Donald Trump Jr. has never known hardship nor charity. There's utterly no evidence his family's ever done good by anyone. He doesn't know sacrifice. He's a spoiled racist blight upon the land. We are better than him and his frickin' Skittles bigotry. That's not the word she used. This country has had many ugly chapters, but the Trumps would be a self-inflicted blow to the ideals of America in every way. And if you're a person of faith or conviction of any kind, you must look deep and ask, do they represent what we should aspire to be? So that's basically the Skittles story there.
Yeah, I'll say.
Now, there's a more academic look at what happened with the New York bombing. And again, I have to emphasize, I was talking about this on Twitter yesterday, New York thieves are not stupid. You know, if they steal the bag and leave the bomb, that's smart. If you do it the other way around, not so smart. So this stuff in New York happened. It could have been very dangerous. It turned out overall a lot of it was incompetence on the part of the bomber. He's caught. That happens yesterday. And Julia Azari, writing in 538, sometimes she also writes at Mischiefs of Faction over at Fox, a political scientist.
Yes.
Asked the question, voters turn to trusted authorities after terrorist attacks, but in this election it's not clear who they think that is. So they talk about the fact that terror threats can affect citizens' political decision-making. After conducting a series of experiments in the United States and Mexico, Jennifer Marola and Elizabeth Sykemeister find that anxiety about terrorism affected people's feelings on a wide range of issues because citizens experienced decreased social trust, leading them to embrace more authoritarian attitudes, including hostility to what social scientists call outgroups, like immigrants or LGBTQ community. But voters don't focus on safety and security in a vacuum. And another study shows that citizens' belief that people should be treated equally regardless of religion or ethnicity weigh against the demand for increased security. Islamophobia is real. Terrorism has been a factor in previous elections. Republicans generally own the issue. But one consistent theme across most of this literature is that when voters feel threatened or insecure, they gravitate towards strong and trusted authority. The political environment this year suggests these perceptions are very much shaped by partisanship. It's difficult to imagine Trump voters who switch to Clinton or Clinton voters who switch to Trump. And furthermore, with no incumbent president and with two candidates who have higher unfavorable ratings than typical, it's not clear that for the elusive undecided voter, there's an authority they trust on the ballot. In other words, everybody who's saying that this is automatically going to help Trump basically don't know what they're talking about.
Okay, well, we've certainly faced that before.
So on the whole, there are several polls that actually give Clinton the lead on who can handle terrorism. Virtually all the polls say she's a better commander-in-chief and that she's more competent, so on and so forth. So I don't really see that this is going to automatically help Trump. Let's put it that way. It's a wash at best, might even help Hillary a tad.
All right. I could go for that.
So, background, again, we also have Obama throwing himself into the race. Nice piece here from Bloomberg about that. And that's just all a warm-up for our polling summary for this morning, which we always like to do. Stu Rothenberg says, if you want to look at the word version of it as opposed to the number version of it.
Yeah, sure. Here's
some perspective on the current spate of confusing presidential polls. Long article, there's this, there's that. Who got it right, who didn't get it right. Poll numbers bounce around, and things can get particularly confusing when polls just switch from registered voters to likely voters, as they're doing now. It's best not to get too caught up in the daily release. Of course, even I fail to heed my advice. So where does the race stand? It's closed more than I expected. Clinton has suffered through some recent criticism. Trump has been on script more than he was initially. But he tends to shoot from the hip more when he feels good as he does now, and the media's focus may well swing back to the Republican nominee after the last few weeks, and that's not good, by the way, for the Republican nominee. Moreover, Clinton and her surrogates seem poised to boost their efforts to energize younger voters, African Americans, and Latinos in November. Trump has been unable to broaden his appeal, which is why he has not grown his support in the minority community or among younger white voters and college-educated whites, the LA Times poll notwithstanding. Oh, by the way, Clinton picked up 2 points today in that one. Clinton, of course, has her own problems, particularly with white men. But as Obama demonstrated 4 years ago, if Democrats turn out the voters, they win. So she still remains the favorite. And today's poll, which folks are talking about, is the Tuesday NBC SurveyMonkey poll. Hillary Clinton regains momentum against Donald Trump. In this poll, she now enjoys 50% support among likely voters, and Trump has 45. They just switched over this particular survey from registered voter to likely voter. Last week, registered voters, she was +4. This week, with registered voters, she's +6, so she gained 2 points over the last week, and that's why I like to use registered voters to compare as to, how you're doing. Where's your trending going? And +5 with likely voters. So +4 with registered voters last week, +5 with likely voters this week. It'll be likely voters from now on for comparison purposes. And first votes are already being cast, so keep that in mind. And it doesn't really change all that much if you add Johnson and Stein, who I think are poised at this point to fade.
Okay.
So Johnson loses a single point when viewing these results using likely voters. Among registered voters, he had 11. Among likely voters, he has 10. Stein is 4 either way. That's where it is now, but I think it'll start to drop. My favorite question, Clinton outperforms Trump on the question it asks voters who they think will win. 56% Clinton, 39% Trump. Again, that doesn't reflect what the final numbers, this versus that person, would do, just the odds. So basically it's 60-40. Now, if you're looking at other odds, of course, this is one of the things that the New York Times likes to track, in other words, the who is winning stuff. Right now, New York Times, 74% chance of winning, which is up a little bit. 538 is 59%. Daily Kos, 65. It's been as high as 73. I expect that to go up in the next few days. The PredictWise, which is the markets, are at 72. So I think that right now, considering PredictWise, where you actually buy your vote, is the market. 538 and Daily Kos are underperforming the market. New York Times is at the market. And Sam Wang is above the market at 88. Everybody else thinks either lean Dem like Charlie Cook or Stu Rothenberg, or likely Dem like Larry Sabato. So on the whole, she's doing okay. Probably had the worst polling week of her campaign last week, recovering this week. So among the polls that are moving up in her favor are Morning Consult, which went up 3 points. It didn't come out today, but in the last few days. Ipsos also went up around 3 points for her. And the SurveyMonkey NBC poll we just talked about went up 2 points. LA Times just went up 2 points. So all of them are moving in her direction. And that's added to the very informative Florida poll. If you missed yesterday's podcast, Armando talked about that at length.
Yes.
With David and me yesterday, and it was really a fascinating look. Let me add some stuff to some of the things Armando was pointing out, which is basically you really have to pay attention to the Latino and African American voters. There was, in fact, a Latino Decisions poll out recently. They're doing a weekly tracking poll. And right now, they have Hillary Clinton up 53 points, 71-18. And the same time in 2012, Obama was up 42, Clinton up 53, Obama 42. So Clinton was 71-18 in this week's tracking poll with Latinos, and Obama was 68-26. So she is overperforming what Obama did in a tracking poll that actually looks at a population with a large enough sample to make some sense and actually believe it, as opposed to some of the other polls that have a very small Latino sample and aren't necessarily, with those small subsamples, going to be correct. So she's doing fine with Latino voters. She will need to improve her performance a little bit with African American voters, but I think that will come. I think the whole birther thing is going to hugely help with that. And Obama, of course, campaigning. Again, it's not transferable. You can't transfer liking Bernie to liking Hillary or liking Obama to liking Hillary. But it's all good news for her because they're all very strong surrogates. And bottom line is, she's been leading the entire election campaign. She's leading now. She's starting to make a little bit of an uptick in the polls. And I think that we're in decent shape. Plus Pennsylvania.
All right. I'm okay with this. I'm keeping an even keel.
Yeah, which one should do? Don't go up too much, don't go down too much. I will remind everybody, and I was just in touch with John Sides this morning, and he says he's going to rewrite and do something more relevant and timely before Monday. Monday's the debate.
Okay. All right.
And this is from September, October 2012. John Sides, writing in Washington Monthly, do presidential debates really matter? Remember all the famous moments in past debates that changed the outcome of these elections? They didn't.
I remember a lot of talk about them.
Yeah, well, we talked about that in 2012, and then Romney had his big debate, and then everybody said, oh, it makes a huge difference, and actually by the end of the debates it didn't. And arguably the political scientists will tell you stuff that seems counterfactual because it's one of those things everybody knows, but they will tell you that when you really look at the data, Romney's 47% remark didn't really make that much difference. And a whole bunch of stuff that you think makes a difference doesn't really make a difference. And so I asked him if he's going to update this article, and he said yes before Monday. And I said, that's great. Just don't title it LOL Nothing Matters, please, because otherwise I'll quit.
LOL. Something matters.
But on the other hand, that's the theme. A lot of stuff that we think is like hugely important isn't that important. The fundamentals are the fundamentals. And I think the best illustration of this probably was in 2004 when Bush had that 3-point lead over Gore. Excuse me. Yeah, it was 2000, not Kerry, but when Bush had that 3-point lead, or 2-point lead or 1-point lead over Gore, and even with Kerry, in 2004, when Bush was leading, you'd think it's such a small number, you ought to be able to close that gap, but you never could.
Yeah.
So now, in this very stable NBC SurveyMonkey poll, one poll, but the aggregate at Huffington Post is also 4 points. A 4 to 6 point, it's actually a 5 to 6 point lead in the SurveyMonkey poll is actually pretty stable. It's a relevant lead, shall we say.
Listen to the monkey.
It's a bigger lead than what you might get the impression from Real Clear Politics, only because Real Clear Politics includes the LA Times poll, which I think they shouldn't.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to see them merge into Real Monkey Politics. I think that would be a great idea.
Real Monkey Politics. I'm not sure if I'm ready for Real Monkey Politics.
No? All right. Well,
I don't know. We already have, a bit of odd stuff going on. Here's a really nice article from Sasha Eisenberg and Stephen Iacchino over at Bloomberg. And remember, we talked about some of the other swing states that seem to be doing it one at a time here. So now they've got 3, Iowa, Nevada, and North Carolina, and they talk about the base votes and the number of get-out the votes each candidate would need in order to win, and the structural sense of who's ahead and who's not. So this is gaming the 6-week election day, considering that early voting is happening in Iowa, Nevada, and North Carolina.
Yeah. Are they likely voters if they call you and you've already voted?
Yeah, then actually some polls will start to say already voted. And they have a separate category for that.
That makes sense. I mean, it's strange. I mean, they're extremely likely voters, I guess.
But listen to these stats. I mean, these are fascinating if you don't keep these in mind. All right. So, what percent of the population votes early prior to Election Day, and what percentage of the population actually votes on Election Day?
Is there an answer?
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't know.
It varies by state, of course. But here's the thing. Colorado, 64% voted early. 36% voted on Election Day. Nevada, 62% voted early. 38% voted on Election Day. This is back in 2012. And in North Carolina, 57% voted early and 43% voted on Election Day. One could argue that for those states, the election's decided before November 8th.
Yes, you'd have to. I mean, there's a lot of votes out there, but...
Well, but it's going to vary. You could get Democrats out early, which is the strategy, because they're not dependable, and therefore you want to get them banked. And then you have this huge upsurge of Republican reliable voters showing up on Election Day because they're all 93, and that's the way it used to be, and they always do it that way.
True.
And so you could be ahead up until Election Day, and then the Republicans could catch up. In Iowa, what's happened is that in the previous elections where Democrats have won, and they may not this time, they bank those votes early, and then the Republicans can't catch up. And so that's what winds up going on. Yeah. So if you're talking about showing up at the polls and, you seem to be predominantly Republicans here at the polls in Iowa, well, that's the way it always is.
Okay.
So, but let's go back to state by state here. So Arizona, it's almost 50-50, 48% early, 52% on Election Day. Iowa's 38% early and 62% on election day. So you can overcome stuff in Iowa. And that's why it's so important to get that vote early. And Ohio is 29% early and 71% on election day. Colorado, Nevada, and North Carolina are the early voting states. Arizona, Iowa, and Ohio are not.
Yeah. I guess not. Arizona, Ohio, where else? Arizona, Ohio.
And Iowa.
And I'm trying to think about, well, I guess there's a million factors in it, of course, including how easy they make it to vote early.
Right.
Versus, and of course, how easy is it to vote on election day? I suppose if in your local polling place, it's a matter of strolling up and spending 5 minutes and voting, then the incentive to vote early is not as strong.
Do you have this article here? I'm going to put it right at the bottom of the.
I guess I do now. Let's see.
The Skype feed that I give you, just to make sure that you can have it up. And if you would go down about halfway, a little bit more than halfway, you'll see something that says the Arithmetic Nevada.
All right.
And basically, it's a chart, just like we've done with some of the other states. There's the number of base voters, there's the number of get-out-the-vote targets, and then there's the persuadables, who really are the undecideds.
Okay.
In Nevada, the base voters for Republicans are greater than the base voters for Democrats.
Oh, yes. Okay, right.
But the get-out-the-vote targets for Democrats is much larger. If the Democrats get the base and they get out the votes, they will more than win Nevada without even having to worry about the persuadable ones. If the Republicans get their base and they get their get-out-the-vote target, they still will need a significant number of persuadables in order to win Nevada. Why is that important? Because the whole Democratic effort is to get out the vote. And let me give you an example of how the reporting about this can fool you. You will see on cable TV in some of these swing states a little focus group about undecided voters. I don't like Hillary. I don't like Trump. I don't know. I heard this. It didn't persuade me. It didn't move me. Yada, yada, yada. Oh, I saw this commercial and it didn't really move me. Frank Luntz does a lot of that. I showed persuadables all the Clinton commercials and it didn't move a single vote. Who cares? That's not who it's aimed at. It's aimed at the get out the vote targets. If you get them, you win. You don't need the persuadables, and those commercials are not meant to get persuadables to be persuaded. Republicans do. So you may find that if you show Democratic and Republican commercials to a persuadable target group, they prefer the Republican vote. Why is that? Because it's aimed at them.
Yes.
The Democrats aren't aiming that. They're aiming at their own base, trying to get their own base out. And so, you have to be very careful when you read or listen to some of these focus groups about undecided voters who frankly may never make up their mind, and some of them won't even vote at all, because it may be interesting television, but it has almost no interest, for example, in Nevada to the Democratic Party.
Where do they get the get out the vote targets? Who reports
They're basing on 2012. This is remember, Sash Eisenberg did this whole book, The Victory Lab, and he talked about the data crunchers in the Democratic Party and how they make this out with their voter lists and then assigning stuff. The analysis is conducted by Clarity Campaign Labs, which is one of these outfits that go ahead and does this. And I know some of the people who are associated with it, at least one on Twitter identified himself, John Hagner, as a Democratic operative who helps to work with some of these numbers. And I said, this is a really great article. And he tweeted back, I was really enjoying working with them on this. So that's where the numbers come from.
I mean, they're very, it's so detailed and it's persuasive. I mean, if I'm Donald Trump,
that's the Democratic way of doing it.
I guess so.
Republicans are, let's get a lot of TV time and get big rallies.
Well, I'm sort of wondering why Donald Trump doesn't say, you know what? Why don't we have a bigger get out the vote target? Make it 1 billion.
Because that doesn't benefit him.
Oh, why not?
If he has a rally and then he can have it at his hotel and then charge himself money and then make money on it, that's interesting to him.
Yes.
But if he just puts money into a get out the vote, how does he make money?
Well, no, it just
why would that be interesting?
I don't know. Why would you spend money to report a different number for your get out the vote target? I'd just say it's what's here? Look at Nevada's Democratic get out the vote target is 328,753. Mine is 328,754, and I didn't spend a dime. I won.
Yeah, exactly.
I did it.
So who are in Nevada are the groups that voted before Election Day in 2012. That data is known.
Okay.
28% were the Democratic base, 21% were the Democratic get out the vote. So that's 49%. Nearly half of it were Democrats. 31% was the GOP base, and 11% was the GOP get out the vote, illustrating the point I'm trying to make about how Democrats vote early, Republicans vote late. So that's 42%, as compared to 49%. 5% were persuadables and 5% were other. So 10% of the early vote could have gone either way. And 90% was, we know who you're voting for, we just have to make you do it.
Okay. Is that now, the Nevadans vote in the general election the same way that they do in the primaries, that you can vote out of your precinct if you're working, as so many people do in Los Angeles, or in Las Vegas, and you can, they have this.
Good question. I don't know. Maybe one of our Nevadans knows that. I don't have the green papers open in front of me. That's where I usually get that info from.
Yeah.
But just wanted to illustrate a little bit about, just how all of this works. You can look at the same stuff for North Carolina.
I will.
All right. Well, a week-by-week analysis of 2.4 million early voters in North Carolina demonstrates the sway African-American voters may have before Election Day.
Okay. Yes.
Because the closer you get to Election Day, it starts to even out. There's more whites than African-Americans that are voting. And unfortunately, Hispanic, Asian, and other categories are so small you can't really tell what's going on. But Clinton's North Carolina campaign, August 31st, decided, and that's when the Supreme Court restored a week of voting beginning October 20th, where the Republican-led legislator had tried to get that off the calendar. So those restored 7 days make the Democrats much more competitive in North Carolina than they otherwise would. In 2012, 37% of the Democratic base, 30% of the early vote was Democratic base, and 14% was get out the vote for the Democrats. So that's 51%. More than half of the early vote was Democrat, and 40% was GOP, and the rest were, we're not really sure how they voted. So the way it works in North Carolina, it's kind of similar. The base for the Democrats and Republicans are similar. The base for the Republicans is bigger in Nevada, but in North Carolina, the bases are similar. They get out the vote targets are much higher for Democrats, but you have to get those voters out to the polls, and that's not always easy. And it turns out that if the Republicans got their base and their get out the votes, they would need almost no persuadable targets to win. If the Democrats get their base and their get out the vote targets, they win easily. So it turns out that both in Nevada and in North Carolina, the persuadables are not really the group that you need the most. There may be a certain number of them, but you can win in those states just by getting out who you think are your own voters. Again, that's going to change the advertising, it's going to change the approach, it's going to change everything. If you know that. If you're a Democrat, you know that. If you're a Republican, you may not know any of this.
Right. You just do focus groups with persuadables.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So there's a very, very different approach to these things that I think this article really nicely illustrates.
Well, that's a good point. And, for anybody that Frank Luntz is still capable of panicking, I suppose that's the answer.
So you see these focus groups on TV, and it's not always Luntz, it may be somebody else, and they go, well, I don't know, I got 6 people here, and 2 are Clinton voters, and 2 are Trump voters, and 2 can't make up their mind, and, or 3 can't make up their mind, and one of them may go Trump or is leaning Trump, I don't know, and all this stuff happened, and it didn't seem to affect them, I don't know, they're still not persuadable, they're still undecided, I don't know, and you tear your hair out and saying, what's it going to take for you folks to decide? I think the better approach is saying, who cares?
Okay. Well,
what state you're on?
There
may be other states where it's really important, right?
Yeah.
But for those states, not so much.
Okay. I think I have a takeaway from this. Thank you.
Good. Meanwhile, did I mention to you that Chris Christie's toast?
There was a point at which you said it. It was
so clear after he lost that you didn't need to mention it anymore.
Right. So what is he now?
Now the Bridgegate trial starts, and the first thing the federal prosecutor says is, "Oh yeah, he knew. He was lying about that. He knew all along. He knew the entire time."
Donald Trump was right.
Donald Trump was right when he said that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting trial. I just want to remind people what's going on.
Okay. Yeah, I heard that had started, and I will say this: we were getting a little bit overexcited here, and it's the prosecution's opening statement that we were all getting excited about. That's what prosecutions say in their opening statement.
Yeah, but it's all about narrative, you know. I mean,
That's
you got
true.
who does Trump surround himself with? Paul Manafort and Steve Bannon.
Yes.
And crooks like Chris Christie, who are currently on trial.
Yes.
You know, and so you got a basket of deplorables who are just actually on staff. Donald Trump Jr., who tweets about Skittles. You know, you are who you surround yourself with.
Yes. Christie is supposedly the transition chief, which is, I don't know if I've never tracked this, but I've never seen a campaign have a transition office, you know, before you win. But I guess maybe it's actually standard practice, and I don't know about it. But yeah, so if you there was much made of the opening of the trial. Yeah, we got to wait for, well, the defense gets to go too. They do get to say things, and we'll see how the trial goes. But it was also interesting. People were reminding me yesterday, yeah, Donald Trump did say exactly that he absolutely knew right as it was going on. And I think it's one of the few things that we believe Donald Trump about as soon as he said it. He occasionally says things that...
Even a stop clock.
Yeah, right. Of course, it was well after that he said, oh, and I'll accept your endorsement and make you a prominent functionary on my campaign. Now, go get me a Big Mac.
Right.
But, you know... Whatever.
So, we'll have to see it play out, of course. But, you know,
sure.
Given the fact that Christie lied his butt off on Sunday shows, claiming that Trump never really was a birther, and even if he was, he stopped doing it in 2011, and the media's making too much of this, you know, to have the next day the prosecution say, oh, by the way, Chris Christie's an out-and-out liar, is really helpful. Oh, speaking of lying, Dean Beckett, who is, remember my theory of how the papers are covering this is that Marty Barron of Spotlight fame over at the Washington Post is way a better editor than Dean Beckett at the New York Times, which is why the Post coverage has been better than the Times coverage. But Dean Beckett came out today and said, you know, we got to use lying a lot more.
Oh, why? Did he sell papers?
We are having a unusual candidate who's breaking the norms, and it's about time the New York Times broke its own norms. So you'll be seeing that a lot more.
I did see that was in the Atlantic today. Okay.
Yeah, that was one of my more interesting reads today. Another one was George H.W. Bush to vote for Hillary.
Yes, right. I know. I hope he makes it to the election and gets a chance to do that. They have early voting, and where is he?
I don't know.
Keeping him these days?
He probably is in Kennebunkport. It's still summer.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he votes in Texas or whether he votes in Maine.
Yeah.
After all, the family's from Connecticut.
Right. True. So we'll see if they're shipping him back to Texas.
Well, he can vote absentee, right? So I don't know.
I guess
I don't know where he's voting. But he's voting for Hillary wherever he votes, which
something.
is kind of important. And of course, we're all waiting for Donald Trump to tweet out the easily predicted. I don't like Republican presidents who
I like
lose re-election. I only like Republican presidents who win re-election.
Yeah. Well, he came up yesterday. We were just ahead of the curve as I was discussing Mike Pence's announcement that his VP role model was going to be Dick Cheney. Mm-hmm. And at first blush, I thought, well, it's possible he doesn't remember any other Republican vice president except Dick Cheney. But, he's not a brilliant guy. But he's been in Republican politics for long enough. But that he didn't really have a great deal of choice. It's Dick Cheney or George H.W. Bush, he was at least anti-Trump at the time. And now, by the end of the day, the word was out that he was going to vote for Hillary Clinton. You can't pick him. Otherwise, you have Nixon Agnew, maybe Jerry Ford, Nelson Rockefeller, who's anathema. There's no Republican vice presidential candidate model to hold up. Not since the end of World War II, and maybe not even before. They're just not producing. They don't produce a lot of great seconds in command, I guess.
Right.
Or first, really. But, okay.
E.J. Dionne has an interesting piece about how Spiro Agnew's ghost lives on, in that he had attacked back in the 60s the liberal media,
yes.
and they've been reacting and hiding under the desk ever since. And this might be the election that turns it around.
Okay.
There actually might be a change in the media, in the so-called liberal media, based on Donald Trump, which would be a really fascinating and ironic sort of thing.
That would be nice.
It would. Anyway, Hillary Clinton's chances of winning the presidency are currently up to 74% today on the New York Times Upshot. And I'm looking at the percentage that Trump has gained since September. He's now at a 26% chance of winning. And if he keeps on at the same rate that he's going, he ought to cross the 50% threshold sometime mid-January.
Okay.
Right? Which might be a little too late for him, but there you go.
All right. Well, late search. Okay.
Anyway, it's interesting that H.W. Bush did this, because political scientist Seth Maskett has a piece today in, Pacific Standard magazine, that says, insulting Donald Trump isn't enough. Republican insiders who fear a Trump presidency need to actively endorse the only plausible alternative, which, by the way, is exactly what H.W. Bush did today. And that's what a lot of the insiders who are the security people who say Trump is not good enough. He's particularly talking about Robert Gates, who really needs to come off the fence. Maybe even Colin Powell, who knows. But, there are some that have endorsed her. There are some who won't endorse her but say they cannot vote for Trump and Trump is unacceptable. Then you got H.W. making the move, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not anybody follows that.
Yeah. Now, that's still, I guess, shrouded in some mystery. I guess he didn't announce it.
He told it to a Kennedy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why millennials have such problems with these, dynasty stuff.
Yeah, right. Well,
so the Bush told the Kennedy that he's voting for a Clinton. I mean, what's the problem here?
Well, I don't know. Is this like the Cabots and the lodges here?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody know what that is?
For those of you who aren't from New England,
or
the Cabots only talk to the lodges, and the lodges only talk to God.
This is true. So it's said in regional yarn spinning from the 1800s.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah. Anyway, so here's that Peter Beinart piece, The Death of He Said, She Said Journalism. New York Times responds to a candidate who breaks all the rules by discarding some of its own. And I just wanted to give you an idea of the entire spectrum of stuff that's going on here. Is the Siena research poll out this morning? Clinton maintains large lead over Trump in New York, 51-30, which restores my faith in humanity. New York just doing very, very well here. And then finally, I don't know if Armando would find this particularly interesting. Shifting Cuban voters could be the difference in Florida from the AP.
Shifting Cuban
Basically,
voters.
It's an older, younger generation story, which is well known.
Yes.
And it's what they find is when they talk to younger Cuban Americans, they're not yet ready to jump on the Clinton train, but they can't vote for Trump.
No, he won't let them.
Yeah, so we'll see. In other words, according to the article, which is one of the things I found so interesting, is that the article, and I am not in a position, I'm just reading it, I'm not in a position to judge it because I'm not them and I'm not there. But, it reflects other things that I've heard. Along the lines of Cuban Americans in Florida don't normally automatically think of themselves as Hispanic and Latino the way the rest of the country's Hispanic and Latino are, but Donald Trump is driving them to think exactly that way, particularly for younger generations. Opening up the door to vote Democrat, which is not a typical thing for the older generation Cubans.
No.
And Armando has a great deal of experience with that, and I thought maybe he might want to weigh in on it.
I would think so.
Because, maybe I'm wrong, but on the other hand, I always like to get him on the show to hear what he thinks, if he's available, and I don't even know that.
Right. We're just speculating.
We're just speculating, but it would be irresponsible not to speculate. So, that's really the story, and I think that, the The birther strategy has not gone away. There's a bunch of stories about, they tried to change it to Hillary Clinton. That's not true. Well, they tried to make it about Sid Blumenthal. Well, that's not true. And so the birthing strategy remains. And the idea that it's going to go away is nonsense, because it's not going to go away for African Americans, and it's not going to go away for Obama, and it's not going to go away for Clinton, and it's not going to go away for the Clinton campaign bringing it up. So the idea that it's over because, Kellyanne Conway says it's over is kind of silly. And I think that's part of the reason why she's improving in the polls. But we'll see what the rest of the week brings. We'll see what tomorrow brings. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning, and we'll see what you want to talk about next on the show, because
we'll see.
We never really know, do we?
Yeah, we don't. I might have to look something up. Let me ask you just a quick question. If you review the news, I've heard
at times.
Once in a while. I got a sort of a weird random Jill Stein supporting tweet last night, and I'm puzzled, and it may just be because I'm ignorant of the news here. But I was talking about the Skittles thing last night, and a Stein supporter tweeted to me, you may try to use the Skittles to camouflage what happened today with Hillary's IT guy, but we all know the real scandal is #Hillary's hacker. And I was just sort of like, okay, I really don't know what that is. And I guess that's the kind of keen finger on the pulse insight that's got her at 2% in America. But do you even know what? I mean, I remember the old story about the IT guy and the servers and everything. But did something happen yesterday? Did you notice?
Not that I know of. She was on Jimmy Fallon. That's the only thing I know that happens.
So ding ding. Well,
all I know is that somebody interviewed Jill Stein.
Yeah.
And she was claiming she's better than Hillary on every possible count, including blood pressure. Even my blood pressure is lower than hers, and somebody actually cited Hillary's blood pressure. But, what's your blood pressure? Well, it's 110 over 70. Well, hers is 100 over 70. We know that because she released her medical form, so you don't even beat her on that, too.
Oh.
And Dr. Jill Stein said, it's impossible. That's how the whole interview started. So, it was in depth, and it was important, and it was, showing that she's got her finger on the pulse of everything, and, you scratch your head and say, this is like dumb. That's the only thing I know that happened.
I have my finger on Hillary Clinton's pulse, and I got it wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And she's a doctor. Well, okay, that's terrible. I'm going to look it up just to see if I can. I'm sure something did happen, and we're all just ignorant Americans and Hillary bots and all for not noticing. But I just thought that was interesting that you could, spit that out and have relatively informed people who read the papers say.
Okay, so here's what they're talking about, because we could always depend upon the Hill.
Yeah, well, they'll
tell us what's happening, okay? They've been tweeting this story over and over.
As they do, and I still miss it.
As they do, and I still missed it. But the House Oversight Committee is reviewing a Reddit post. That alleges an IT specialist who worked on Clinton's private server sought advice on how to alter the contents of very VIP emails, according to Representative Mark Meadows, Republican, North Carolina.
That is hot stuff.
It said it on a Reddit post, therefore it must be true.
That's a dope line right there. We're going to put that to a beat.
Right. So
that was pretty white.
I don't know.
Okay.
So, of course, Jason in the House is going to look at it and see what happens, and maybe he'll come up with something just about the time Donald, crosses the 50% threshold back in February and March of next year.
Yeah, well, anytime now.
But that must be what they're talking about.
I guess so. That's the thing that happened with her IT guy. Somebody posted about him on Reddit.
Right. So here's the deal. So apparently Hillary's IT guy doesn't know anything about IT, so we went on Reddit asking for help.
Yes, that's exactly what he did. And he did it yesterday, weirdly.
Right.
And,
so that proves everything.
Yeah, no, okay. So, hi, everybody. I'm a secret IT guy for a very prominent politician, and I need help on fraud. Can you help me?
Right. So I'll just post right here, and you guys can just send me stuff because I'm sure, I'll take your advice.
Yes. Always a good idea. Follow whatever's on Reddit.
Right.
Okay. Well, that doesn't seem likely to me, but all right. I'll accept it. Now, at least I know what the guy's talking about and why it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Anyway, I think what Hillary's blood pressure was, or might be, I think is far more important.
It probably is.
So long as it's measurable.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's when it's...
Okay, remember, folks, if you're thinking about this email thing, the lesson here is that state really has awful IT.
Yeah.
They don't know how to communicate. And everybody who works at state looks at the system and says, this sucks. I need some workaround so I can actually do my job. And people from Colin Powell to Hillary Clinton find ways to do it. And if you're upset about that, be upset at the State Department and the Congress for not giving the State Department funds to fix the problem. That's the issue.
Yes. And it's a real one. I mean, you got to be able to communicate in real time around the world as securely as possible at any given moment. So, okay, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you deal with that. We went through that, though, and apparently the answer's on Reddit. So, time for
right, because the funny thing is Congress hasn't been investigating this for like some time in depth. And only a couple of weeks before the election, they find on Reddit the real answer to everything that's going on.
Right. /R knows it all.
Right. So either the Republicans are completely incompetent or, and it really shouldn't be either or, there's nothing there. And maybe the Republicans are completely incompetent and there's nothing there.
That could be. And maybe Jill Stein voters are okay with that Skittles meme because something on Reddit.
Yeah, I don't know. So Stein isn't going to be a factor. And I suspect we're starting to see the drop in Johnson. It may be that the tightening in the polls does one good thing, and that's getting people to focus on the choices that people actually have. One of these persons is going to be president. So vote for one or vote for the other. And if you vote for anybody but Clinton, you are empowering a Trump win. Understand that. And if you don't get it, see 2000.
Yeah. I know.
I mean, I don't know why it has to be stated in such harsh terms. You don't get to play around with it. You know, you don't get to play around with your vote. Sure, you have a right to vote for whoever you want to. Nobody says you don't. But, you know, check your privilege.
Things happen when you exercise your privileges, and if you don't want those things to happen, and
think about what you're doing.
Right. And I don't think that there are any states that don't matter anymore. Not because they're going to be close, but because there's going to be. I mean, Trump is already ready to point to. Well, he'll just make up nonsense about tampering with the vote. I was thinking actually earlier when we were talking about early voting and get out the vote stuff. I would put some cash down on a bet saying that that Trump will at some point accuse Hillary Clinton's get out the vote operation of being some kind of voter fraud tampering thing. Right. You know, they're busing people to the polls. Yeah, that's called get out the vote. You go to people who can't make it to the polls and you give them rides to their precinct and let them vote. Oh my God, you know, and there's going to be people out there slashing tires again and saying this is all I'm doing is disrupting their voter fraud operation. And they won't understand that, you know, senior citizens sometimes need a ride to the polls. People whose cars break down need a ride. People who don't have cars need a ride to the polls. People whose polling places are closed need a ride to the magistrate to get a provisional ballot, whatever it is.
When I see how New York City residents and denizens respond to terrorism, it improves my faith in humanity and makes me think that the American voter will respond to Trump in the proper manner. The problem is that even when he loses, he's going to have done some incredible damage to the Republican Party and to the democratic system, and that's going to have to be addressed after the election, for sure.
Well,
with that, I'll leave you and see where you take the rest of the show. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Friday, I will not be on the show, just a reminder.
Okay.
More meetings. But tomorrow's good.
Okay.
So I'll talk to you tomorrow.
We'll do that. Thanks very much. Take care, Greg. Thanks for staying after extra for extra work on Hillary's IT guy. I'm glad we straightened that one out. So a good exchange and some good observations yesterday. Speaking of the old, and I know that what do we call it? Well, voters who are considering the third party and fourth party and fifth party, I guess, out there. I hate limiting it to just the third. You know, I understand what's going on, and I understand you got issues, and I understand that you just feel like you just can't. Although I guess I would say the questioning of why the 2000 and Nader model keeps coming up seems to me, well, I mean, it must be tiresome. I would agree. But, I mean, a lot of people find the arguments that, for third-party candidates at this point pretty tiresome, too. So we'll all agree to allow one another to be tiresome. But once again, and I was getting to the point where I said, all right, we can stop. I know, we all know what happened, and we all know what the excuses for what happened are, and we all know that, yes, it would have been great if Al Gore had been a better candidate, but he wasn't, but okay. So I was willing to put it all aside, but then I did see somebody ask a good question, because it's coming up again. And I guess if you're sick of people pointing back to 2000 and Nader and blaming it on Nader voters, then I would be wary of bringing up the stratagem that, well, if we vote for, let's say, Jill Stein or Gary Johnson and Trump wins, then things will get so bad that America will wake up to the need for people who are even, more progressive than Hillary Clinton, and therefore Jill Stein, and I don't know why anybody would think, and therefore Gary Johnson, because I think that's kind of out of the question. But so it's the same gambit, the same strategy that was proposed with Nader, by Nader in his election, and it failed miserably. And so I thought wisely, the question put, can anybody tell me what Nader agenda items benefited, what agenda items were moved forward by this strategy? Well, if you all vote for Nader and Bush wins, then people will see how bad it gets, and then something. So what has it been on the Nader agenda since then that has moved so far forward, thanks to everyone waking up under George W. Bush? I guess you could probably construct something like you could say, well, although who knows? I mean, it's difficult for me to do because I don't have any definitive idea of what exactly Nader's agenda really was in 2000. I heard him. I saw it written down, but it was all so speculative and loosey-goosey and dumb. I mean, it was not worth spending a great deal of time analyzing because he wasn't going to win. But surely there were some things on his agenda at that point that are reflected in the agendas adopted by Democratic candidates since who have won. That would be Barack Obama, of course. Although I think that would probably be pretty difficult for, I don't know, maybe there are people who are, I was a Nader supporter and I'm still a Nader supporter, and I still, for those who said, well, now I came to regret that vote very much, and I've since been an Obama supporter. There's probably quite a few of them, but I guess I'd be looking for who's a Nader holdout who likewise, nonetheless, I should say, came to be a Obama supporter, and that person can tell me what I like about what Obama's done is he's implemented so much of, or even just this tiny bit of, the Nader agenda that attracted me in the first place. And so we really did win. I mean, except that it took 8 years to get around to electing somebody else. America got so bad that he was elected to 2 terms, and then whatever. Okay, so I thought that was a good point anyway. What was it that did this strategy win? Or is it ridiculous to say this right now at this point? And is it particularly ridiculous to make the same argument and then get angry that people hearken back to the Nader scenario again? If the answer is extensive and lots of things from the Nader agenda were implemented in the Obama administration, then I guess, 1, that's good, and then 2, I guess I would ask, what's the tragedy then of electing Hillary Clinton if, by all accounts, this is a continuation of the Obama administration? So I suppose you'd have to be telling me that there are people who are unrepentant Nader voters who are nonetheless Obama supporters and nonetheless Hillary Clinton opponents. And I guess that could happen too. But I think we're talking about fewer and fewer people as this scenario goes on. Anyway, to catch up with a couple of other items that were discussed earlier and have been commented on since, Bill tells me that Skittles are owned by Wrigley, which is not a great place to be. But then I'm also told by Steve in Illinois, 21 Law, if you're looking for him on Twitter, that Wrigley is likewise owned by Mars Incorporated. And yuck is what he has to say about that. And I gather that, corporate ownership in either case, not the most progressive folks in the world. Okay, so let's see. What other fun things have I put aside here? Oh, look at this. I got it. This is really for commenting after the show. But I guess those of you who are longtime participants in Philadelphia area politics, I guess, might enjoy this one. Scott Charles, who's working so diligently on the distribution of gun locks in the Philadelphia area, just, tweeting out or retweeting something from Fox 29 Philly's morning show. They were being joined by Nick Cannon on the air, and he had some kind of, I'm taking a look at this picture, like some kind of head wrap on as he arrived at the studio anyway that morning. And Scott Charles saying, thanking, oops, did I lose it? Dang, too bad. I wonder if he got rid of that. Too bad. Anyway, he was saying, thanking Nick Cannon for the C. Dolores Tucker shout out. I wonder if he deleted that post or I just clicked on the wrong thing and lost it. But I thought that was something. You don't hear that name come up a lot anymore, and it's a rarity. I met C. Dolores Tucker, and she kind of fell out of favor over, I think, what was it? Was it lyrics and rap lyrics and stuff? I think that got people upset. But anyway, I did get the chance to meet her when working in my one dive into Philadelphia politics back in I guess it must have been like 1990, 91. And that was a fascinating time to be there. A lot of interesting players at work there. C. Dolores Tucker I met at, and this tells you about the ups and downs of Philadelphia politics too. Chaka Fattah's first run for Congress. Of course, he's had his difficulties since. Now, he made it to Congress, true, but been back in the news, Chaka Fattah. Of course, this was his first run for Congress. He was running at that point as an independent, not as a Democrat. Can you believe it? I worked for an independent against a Democratic nominee for the then open seat, I believe, vacated by, is it Bill Gray? Must have vacated that seat. Anyway, so 1991 special election, Lucian Blackwell, who was a ward boss at the time, and I guess not surprising that he rises to snap up the nomination for the special election. But Fattah, a competing power center, Tucker lined up with him, and it didn't work. However, Fattah came back to run in the primary the next time around. It was either 1992 or 94 that he finally did. I guess it must have been 92. I think. I don't know. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure whether it took him 1 year or 3 to get himself into Congress. Blackwell was out. Fattah was in, and he stayed in for a good long time, and then made the newspapers again. All right. Well, just throwing that out there. As I said, a lot of interesting actors in the mix at the time. It was also a special election for the Senate going on at the same time, where Harris Wofford won that race, and that was the one that put Carville and Begala on the map for set them up for pre-1992, making the pitch to the Clinton camp and eventually getting hired and becoming political consulting superstars in their own right. Anyway, it was just really interesting to be on the ground there and watch Philly politics work. All the things that Republicans and not a few Democrats accuse big city, eastern city anyway, Democrats of corruption for. Well, whether or not it's corruption, I couldn't tell you, because I don't really know what kind of deals go on when they agree to do these things. But I did actually make it to the boiler room and see cash being counted out for that phenomenon, that eastern city phenomenon, which we know is walking around money, which it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a good question as to whether do we now consider that to be corrupt entirely. Did we ever? Did we always? I can't even tell. But I mean, I suppose it doesn't. Should it disturb you that people who agree to work on behalf of a candidate to get that candidate elected are rewarded with cash? I guess it depends on the context in which the deal is made. Like, for instance, right now, Steve Bannon is working hard for the election of Donald Trump in exchange for cash. Though I suppose because he's being paid, probably not actually physically in cash, and then declaring the income and paying taxes on it, etc. And the exchange of money for his work is open and obvious. That's supposed to be better than for people who say, well, instead of accepting thousands or in some cases hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in exchange for helping this candidate get elected, I will take $100 in exchange for walking the precinct, knocking on doors, getting out the vote. And you can't accept that cash because you're a volunteer, and a volunteer can't be paid or else he's not a volunteer. Okay, so he's hired. Yes, but he was paid in cash, and he probably didn't declare it. Well, then that's a tax evasion issue on the part of the one person, I suppose. But I guess it's tax evasion on the part of the people paying the money, too. I don't know whether they ever purged that practice. I doubt it. But it really does happen. And I can tell you this, it really wouldn't make a great deal of difference in terms of the Democratic versus Republican voting patterns in Philadelphia. There's just not enough cash to make people vote Republican in numbers there. But it can't make them happy, I'm sure, to know that they're getting like literally 0 votes in many precincts and that there is cash payment going on. And I know they love to portray that as direct cash payment in exchange for voting Democratic, when without the cash, those people would be voting Democratic, but maybe they'd be more persuadable, or maybe if we gave out money, they would vote Republican. But what a holdover from the old days where I guess that kind of patronage, it's just that much more open and obvious when it's done in cash, I guess. But, I mean, it's what ward healers do. I helped you, now you help me. I don't know. Seems dirtier when it's in cash, I guess. But I can report to you that I did see it with my own eyes. But don't ask me that in court. Okay. Let's see. What other news can we round up? By the way, I agree also with Greg Armando, if you're listening, if you've got any comment to make on the shift in Cuban American voting profiles in Florida. I mean, that's been a long time developing, that story. And I also have personal stories about that one too. And I guess the existence of a growing cohort of Democratic Cuban American elected officials riding that wave, recognizing that it exists and doing everything that they can to nurture it. That's why part of the reason why New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez spends so much time in Florida, nurturing that growing and emerging base of younger, usually Democratic voting Cuban Americans. But more to the point really would be, I'd be interested in Armando's discussion of the disconnect between the Cuban American population and the rest of the Latino Hispanic populations and how they tend, or at least used to, it was always my impression, hold themselves apart and separate from the rest of it. Certainly, it makes a certain amount of sense as between them and the, well, I guess what we would more properly refer to as the Latino population, Central American, Mexico to Central America. It's a different region and a different way of life and different culture entirely and a different migration pattern. And it's not really a matter of holding yourself out separate, as we are separate. We're different. We come from a different place and moved to a different place. Came from a different culture, moved to a different culture. So I suppose that's, but it is interesting that Trump is uniting them, and Trump is likely uniting them because, as Armando was saying yesterday, they can't get enough of calling Cuban Americans beaners, which doesn't make any goddamn sense if you have any idea who you're talking to at all. But for Trump voters, they're all brown, so they're all the same. So I guess maybe that's it. And here is Armando. Hey, good morning. Nope, he's driving through a tunnel. Okay, I'm sure he'll try again in just a minute. But you got your wish, Greg, but only just briefly. Or no, maybe that was your true wish. You got Armando interested, but you didn't actually have to listen. Maybe that's it. All right. Let's see. Another observation behind the scenes this time from. Before I jump over there, I'll try with Armando one more time. Hey, Armando, how you doing? Wow. Are you there? Can you hear me, Armando? Roll up the windows. Maybe this time I am, in fact, being pocket dialed. I don't know. But I guess he doesn't hear me. Let me, maybe I can send him a note and try that one. Oh well, that's too bad. Let's see if, this, does, alright, one more attempt here. Armando? Can you hear me? No? I guess not. Alright, well, I sent you a note, via the text function of Skype, and I guess it's just not working. All right.
Hello?
Hey, I hear you. Do you hear us? No? All right. Well, it's difficult to do. If only one person can hear, it's a terrible conversation. All right. Let's see. Let's see if I could just have him say his piece, but then how would we even react to it if he can't hear us? Okay. Well, I'll continue to try. Armando, hi. No? Still no, huh? Okay. Well, I guess this is not going to work out. I guess at this point, I will switch over then. Wow, what a noise. In addition to which, he's flying in a biplane, apparently, at the moment. Hello.
Hey.
There you are.
Sorry
Okay, I figured the ninth time was a charm.
Yeah, about the 8th time, exactly.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I say that. I don't know what the listeners think. But
Yeah,
I
sorry,
can't
listeners.
leave. I'm not allowed
But
to.
I'll make it worth your while, I promise.
All right, let's do it.
I have some walking around money for it.
Yeah, that was a fun thing to watch. I hope I haven't just gotten anybody indicted on that.
Okay. I actually never... I guess the idea was you're paying people... You don't pay voters. You pay people to go and, hustle a vote, get people to go vote or something.
Yeah, they walk around and, you find the right people are known. You find the people who are willing to walk around their neighborhood and say, hey, did you vote? I can get you a ride. And they're few and far between. I mean, plenty of people get paid that way, but I mean, it's no small thing to walk around in Philly in some neighborhoods and say, did you vote? I want you to get out there and I can give you a ride. And they say, get out of here, you idiot. I hate you. I'll punch you in the face.
Yeah, and if you go even further back, I'll buy you a drink.
Yes. And right, you go back to the 1800s and early 1800s, that was open and obvious as well. Kegs of whiskey on the White House lawn.
That's great. Oh, man. Those were the good old days.
Yes, that's all
But-
done now.
Yeah, but you had a question about something.
I
about
was
Cuban
just-
Americans.
Well, Greg brought it up, but he was talking about, I guess, the changing voting habits, particularly among the younger cohort of Cuban Americans, that they are beginning to, shift away from their parents' traditional republicanism towards the Democratic Party, and we've discussed that in the past. But he also brought up a sort of how would we put it? The tendency of the Cuban American population to hold themselves apart and separate, and I think for good reason, from the rest of the Latino and Hispanic communities, and that Trump is beginning to overcome this.
I think it's mutual. Other Latinos hold us apart as well.
That may very well be the case. And I'm sympathetic. Look, you come from totally different regions and then moved again to totally different regions and brought different cultures with you. Wow, what a surprise.
I do think the history of how they got here is important, too, and it explained a lot of the past. The reality is, even under Batista, the 50s Cuba was actually a fairly progressive government. That is, there was a species of socialized medicine in Cuba pre-revolution, believe it or not.
Okay.
Doctors in Cuba had to devote a certain time to public service. That is, they had to work in public hospitals. That was part of the deal. There was a fairly generous welfare state in pre-revolution Cuba. But that's, there was also tons of corruption and incredible, while there was a pretty significant middle class, there was also great income inequality. So when you put all that together, who came from Cuba in the first wave? Well, people who were fleeing Castro. So what made Cuban Americans Republicans? There's really a fairly simple explanation at the time. The Bay of Pigs.
Yep.
They thought Kennedy betrayed them. Kennedy was a Democrat. They blamed Kennedy. And, of course, the civil rights movements and everything else that happened sort of was scary. And anti-communism was what drove Cuban American votes in the first wave. So, by the 70s, that was basically the Republicans at least talked a tougher game on the Cold War. As more people came, because there's two aspects of it. There's new generations, of course, including myself, but there's also a new influx of Cuban refugees. From 80 on, it was a different stripe. While there was more of an economic component to the migration as opposed to political migration.
Yes.
And those were certainly much more open to in addition, there was just been changes in the way everybody looks at the U.S.-Cuba relationship, culminating, of course, in President Obama's most recent moving towards normalizing the relationship. And that really wasn't that controversial, which is interesting. By the time Obama did it, and this often is how it happens, by the way, when a president finally does something, that means the move itself has already moved beyond being completely controversial. It might be bold. It might have two sides to it. There might be some opposition, but it's never going to be over the opposition of 90% of anybody. And the reality is that the Cuban lobbying group, by this point, doesn't really care as much about the embargo. There's very few that do. And now you have remnants. I mean, to the degree that there is a lag in Cubans being Democrats as opposed to other Latinos, a lot of it has to do with two things. One is just habit, and the other is, I would argue, the economic situation of the Cuban American is superior in the United States to most other Latino groups. For a lot of reasons, mostly because the people who came came with a higher level of education and professional skills that they applied. And, of course, they took over Miami in Miami-Dade County and basically run that. So they get to be the big shots on all levels there. So
Yeah.
that's the basic explanation. I suspect, Obama won Cuban Americans in 2012. Hillary's sure to expand that for a lot of reasons, not the least of which Donald Trump. You see, even though she's not a Cuban American, she fits that profile. If you ever see Ana Navarro on CNN, Cubans, we may fight amongst other Latinos, but this whole idea, they realize that, whoever's ripping other Latinos is not too far from ripping you. And there's a certain, what I term very loosely, sort of class consciousness about it. And you realize, that could be me next. And people push back against that.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes a certain amount of sense. And all of that story and the effects of it are very understandable. Why they would, why this separate, or this degree of separation. Well, because we're different people. That's normal. And why now contemplate more cross-cultural unity? Well, because the guy who's running for president is a Republican hates both / all other cultures, so it makes sense.
Yeah, I think if there's one missing part of the analysis in this election, and I think people don't get it because the polling, frankly, doesn't capture Latino voters very well. They're not good at it, and for a lot of reasons. A lot of it is Latinos are less likely to involve themselves in polls, and Spanish-speaking Latinos even more so. So,
yeah, when
you get a poll that's English only, you're just not going to capture the Latino vote. You're just not going to. And I've been, standing on my head saying it's going to be 75-25. He's going to do worse than Romney did, which is a big prediction. But I think that it's not really, whenever you see a poll and it shows Hillary with 60%, Trump with 14% or whatever, I don't think it captures the absolute numbers that I believe Hillary will achieve with Latino voters. I think it might go to 78 to 80% of the Latino vote, up from, say, 71%. Now, that's going to be a point or two at the end of the day, but a point or two adds up. If there's some slippage among African Americans, you're going to make up for it a little bit there. So, in terms of Cuban Americans, that I think you will see a continued move towards Democrats, and I think that's what that New York Times Santa poll showed as well. That while it was close to a split with Obama winning by 7 in 2012, I think you'll see Hillary win and Cuban Americans by 18 to 20.
I would think so.
Which, of course, is much less than she's going to win all the rest of the Latinos. But the reality is that that's partly. I'll put it bluntly and crudely. Part of it is because Obama was black. Racism in Latino cultures is a real phenomenon, and frankly, not as frowned upon for whatever reason in our cultures. That'll piss off some of my Latino friends, but I think that it's true. I think it's also true for homophobia. Those are strands that are still much more prevalent amongst Latinos than obviously should be, and that you find in other parts of the population.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to agree that it's likely to come out in just that way. I just thought we'd have you clarify a little bit about it rather than have me try and explain Cuban Americans to you, because I worked with some in the past.
And in the overall, that's true. The New Jersey situation. New Jersey was always a little more progressive anyway, by necessity. It's hard to win elections as a Republican in New Jersey in a lot of ways. Now, I know Christie won, but by and large, when's the last Republican senator that New Jersey has produced? I can't remember. I think it was the guy, either the Abscam guy or somebody like that.
No, I think he was a Democrat.
Maybe 1980. When's the last? I can't remember the last Republican to win the Senate seat.
Yeah, that's about when we'd be talking about.
And that's when the Republican Party was pre-Reagan. It was the Rockefeller Republican Party, to draw a crude analogy there. That's when Republicans still would win New York or New Jersey in a presidential election. Mm-hmm. That's just obviously not the case anymore. So that sometimes necessity. You look at a fellow like the fellow you worked for, Menendez, who was staunch anti-Castro, pro-embargo, basically a Republican on those issues, but basically a down-the-line Democrat on everything else.
Yeah,
and that would work in New Jersey. And in fact, that's the way you could win with that. Even Torch was just the same way.
Yep, that's true. I'm trying to at the same time trying to find us the last Republican senator, and I mean, not in office for all that long, but in fact, hardly even at all. Just an appointee is the last one that I can find actually appointed by Tom Kean after Harrison Williams, who was caught up in ab scam, had to resign. But other than that, I don't know. But yeah, you're talking about the 70s, 80s, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long, long time. And of course, the governor's races, they're always different for a couple of reasons. I think half the Senate elections always fall in the presidential, but the governor's races never fall in the presidential. In most states, but I actually, I know New Jersey is I guess Christie's up in 2018 if he doesn't resign before that.
Yes.
You get different electorates on off years. That's not nothing new. Anybody who's listening to us knows this. It's just a different pool. It's a different thing you have to do, and that really explains the difference in many respects for the behavior of New Jersey Cubans versus Florida Cubans.
All right. Well, we got more than we even knew we were going to get. But
answer any more questions about the Cuban culture for you?
I don't think so. Oh, you know what? It occurs to me now that I've actually looked it up. There was another Republican appointee sent to D.C. to complete Lautenberg's time. Believe it or not, from June to October of 2013. We all forget, I guess. Jeffrey Chesa.
Wow.
There you go.
How about that? I did. I guess I knew at the time and just blanked it out, but that makes sense.
Other than that, prior to that would be Clifford Case, who ended his career in 1979. So it goes back a ways before there were any other Republicans. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
well,
the last little piece of news I'll tell you is I am an idiot because instead of going around Manhattan to get to Brooklyn, I'm then stuck in the West Side Highway in crawling traffic, and I'm going to be late for court, and it's a disaster.
Oh, that is a disaster. All right,
and it's all my
I'll
own fault because I should have known better, knowing this 23rd Street thing. There was no traffic there. That's always going to push everything out. So I made a huge mistake.
Okay, well, sorry to hear about that. We'll write a note to the judge.
Write a note to the judge, will you? Hey, if you're listening, Judge, I'm on my way.
Yeah, and boy, what a great judge you are as well.
He's the best judge. He's astonishingly excellent judge.
That's my superlative for everyone.
Okay.
All right. Thanks very much, Armando.
Thank you.
Good luck. Hope you get there on time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks again. Let's see. So just by way of filling in all the trivia, let's see. Jeffrey Chesa, Chiesa. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing the name right. That's how well known he was. June to October of 2013. Amazing. Similarly, now over in the other seat, I guess there was another. It was Nicholas Brady, who went on to become Treasury Secretary, I think, under Reagan, was appointed by Tom Kean to finish the Harrison Williams term, and he sat from April to December of 1982. Then prior to that, Cliff Case was the senator for quite some time, from the 50s to the end of the 70s, in what then became the Lautenberg seat, if that makes sense to you. Although Lautenberg, I guess, did Lautenberg occupy both seats or just the one? I guess just the one eventually. Anyway, no, he didn't. He was in both. That's right. Lautenberg, his seat went to Corzine, and then Lautenberg came back to take Torricelli's seat afterwards. Right. So Jeff Chesa, I guess, occupied Lautenberg's other seat. Now, prior to Lautenberg, Nick Brady was briefly the senator. He coming in between Harrison Williams and Lautenberg. Cliff Case, his seat went to Bill Bradley after his resignation. And then prior to Harrison Williams was a Democratic senator from 1959 to 82. And you have to go back before him. Howard Alexander Smith occupied that seat as a Republican from 1944 to 1959. How do you like that? That's some history for you. There's guys wearing hats in their official photos. That's how far back you got to go to find Republicans. Wow. Hamilton Fish Kane. Wow. I bring his name up. I'm scrolling back. What an odd-looking photo. This guy, he's dead. He didn't get to submit his photo to Wikipedia, so somebody else made the choice for him there. But Hamilton Fish Kane. I bring that up because I just saw a few minutes ago, was it David Dayen just sort of making a tongue-in-cheek tweet about dynastic politics in America. Hamilton Fish, of course, would be that's a name that would come from a New York Republican dynasty, and of course Kane, is he the father of, or grandfather, or something else of Tom Kean? I don't know whether there's a relation or not, but you would think. Let's just look at his bio, because this stuff, this kind of stuff interests me, and I hope you too. Hamilton Fish Kane, U.S. Senator from New Jersey, son of Lucy Halstead and John Kane, related to several prominent American politicians, including his great-grandfather John Kane, 1756 to 1795, his brother John Kane, 1852 to 1914, and his son Robert Kane. He was named after his great-uncle Hamilton Fish. Hamilton Fish, of course, they're also a old-timey elected official, but right up into the modern era, there's been Hamilton Fishes representing the Corning, New York area, because Corningware, for a million years. Anyway, let's see. Just sort of scrolling down here, does he have a relationship to Tom Kean? It's not listed here if he does, but I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe it just isn't direct enough to merit mention in Wikipedia, of all places. All right, so I don't know, just a little bit of interesting history. I always like to throw a little bit of that in there. Let's now catch up on some of the other listener comments, and more than listener, a super listener, because he's a bigwig in the Netroots radio circles. Yuri has been listening from Canada, which is permitted under our rules, but just asking. This harkens back to the opening of the show when we were talking about the New York and New Jersey bombing suspect that was apprehended yesterday, and the fact that he is of Afghan extraction but an American citizen. He just notes here a question to ask: who allowed the most recent potential terrorist into the U.S.? That's what Trump wants everybody to ask. But wait, of course, his parents moved here from Afghanistan sometime after the U.S. supported the Mujahideen and Osama Osama bin Laden, fighting Russia over there, or the Soviet Union at the time. It's a mess, as you know. Believe me, it's a total mess. It's a disaster. He immigrated as a kid. I believe he was 7 years old when he came here and gained his citizenship. Parents are, of course, business owners here in the U.S. Most young, radicalizable people, that's some word, are kids that do not live up to the wishes of their parents. Talking about the 20 to 30-year-old group here, the fact that the U.S. economy does not give jobs to these folks is, of course, directly related. And that's likely true. What do you do having moved here from Afghanistan for a better life, and you basically find that, well, once again, whether it's in Afghanistan or here, your only opportunity to break into the economy really is do what your dad does. So that's got to be a little bit depressing if your dad runs a fried chicken restaurant and maybe you don't want to. And, well, facing a potential future under a Donald Trump presidency, I can't believe that that's very encouraging either. Of course, you know, I guess if logic is applied, then we don't get to be we don't turn into bombers no matter what, do we? But, you know, it's interesting to see what kind of calculation might be going on in his head and whether or not he's persuadable on the question of planting bombs in New York and New Jersey just by saying, you know, have you given any thought to the possibility that this might make Donald Trump's election more likely? Or do you not care about that? Because, after all, I would think that jihadis around the world are probably actually... See, Trump thinks they're afraid of a Trump presidency. I think they would welcome a Trump presidency because they could very easily persuade their own countrymen to join an all-out holy war against the United States because we've just elected the Antichrist. That's probably not going to... It's a complicated thing. It's a mess. There's nuance, believe me, and that's why this guy can't be the one at the helm of anything, ever, much less the United States of America and their massive military forces. Okay, so let's see. Moving on to a couple other things that have been pointed out or tweeted about on as the show's been going on. Let's see. Can grab a thing here. Oh, I'll put this one aside. Arliss Bunny having a side conversation, which captured my interest. Great summary, a nice article she's included here. Proves the case that, well, I don't mean to dig this term back up, but Bernie bros who are voting Johnson, we mentioned that yesterday, were never really supporters of Bernie's policies at all. And maybe they weren't, or maybe they didn't understand what they were, but people pointing out, as we did yesterday on the air, that Johnson, in order to migrate from Bernie to Johnson and mean it, means supporting TPP, supporting fracking, opposing federal policies that would make college more affordable or reduce student debt. He wants to abolish the student loan program, the federal student loan program, entirely because libertarianism. He thinks Citizens United was a great decision. Doesn't want to raise the minimum wage at all, or probably even doesn't believe in minimum wage, period. He favors a balanced budget amendment that has previously suggested that he would, and has previously suggested that he would slash federal spending 43% in order to balance the budget. This would require massive cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and social welfare, all of which ought to be anathema to a dedicated Bernie head, but there are many kinds of them, I suppose, and I don't know how many there are who are willing to switch over to pro-TPP just to stick it to the woman, I guess, in this case. All right. Let's see. Plenty of other things to go to here and plenty of other directions to take. As I mentioned, and as Greg mentioned, big-ish news in finding out George H.W. Bush apparently intends to vote for Hillary Clinton. As we mentioned, the story sort of leaked. Just to give you the details and to talk more about dynastic politics, former President George H.W. Bush is bucking his party's presidential nominee, supposedly, and plans to vote for Hillary Clinton in November, according to a member of another famous political family, the Kennedys. Who? Well, in particular, Kathleen Hartington Kennedy Townsend. Remember her? Former Maryland Lieutenant Governor and daughter of the late Robert F. Kennedy. How does this come to pass? Bush 92 had intended to stay silent, not Bush 92, the campaign, but George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, aged 92 currently, had intended to stay silent on the White House race between Clinton and Donald Trump, a sign in and of itself of his distaste for the GOP nominee, but his preference for the wife of his own successor, President Bill Clinton, nonetheless became known to a wider audience thanks to Kathleen Hartington Kennedy Townsend. On Monday, Townsend posted a picture on her Facebook page shaking hands next to the former vice president. I assume that means next to him and shaking his hand, not shaking someone's hand who happened to be next. That doesn't make any sense, but who knows? Anyway, the caption read, "The president," this one right here, "told me he's voting for Hillary," 2 exclamation points. Yeah, there it is. The picture of him, of her, shaking hands. Now, he's seated, and he is in a nice, like, Archie Bunker wing-back chair, too. Cool. And she's shaking his hand and smiling for the camera. What they were doing together, I don't know. They're Bushes and Kennedys. That happens. I can't tell from the photo exactly where they are, but let's say it looks like Maine, right? Why not? That's a Maine-ish sort of house. Let's guess. In a telephone interview, Townsend said here we go, the answer. She met with the former president in Maine earlier today, that would have been Monday, where she said he made his preference known that he was voting for a Democrat. That's what he said, she told Politico. I hope you didn't blow it there. Asked about Townsend's post, George H.W. Bush spokesman Jim McGrath, in an email, replied, "The vote President Bush will cast as a private citizen in some 50 days will be just that, a vote cast in some 50 days. He is not commenting on the presidential race in the interim." So if he's casting it in 50 days and intends to do it, like most older voters, on Election Day, I guess that's coming. I don't know. Maybe he's registered. I don't know where he's registered. Maine? Texas? Anybody know? George H.W. Bush and former First Lady Barbara Bush have stayed out of the political debate since campaigning earlier this year for their son Jeb's unsuccessful bid for president. Neither George H.W. Bush nor his son, former President George W. Bush, attended this summer's Republican National Convention in Cleveland, where Trump accepted the nomination. Many former GOP officials from both Bush administrations have also announced their support for Clinton over Trump, including National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft. Millennials love Brent Scowcroft. This proves my theory. Me and, what was that guy's name? Norm Macdonald. Also on the list there, former Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez, also huge kids love commerce secretaries. One Bush official who has taken Trump's side is former Vice President Dan Quayle. See, he could have been chosen as a vice presidential model after all. Who, by the way, not the endorsement you need. Just saying. Anyway, he told Politico Politico, that's Politicoe. It's not really spelled that way, but they should have done that. That would have been hilarious. Told Politico, you know how they, especially since they capitalize their own name in their publication. One Bush official who has taken Trump's side is former Vice President Dan Quayle, who told Politico in an interview this summer he was still holding out hope both Bushes would back Trump. Clearly in their heart of hearts, I should hope they would want a Republican president, but they can speak for themselves, Quayle said in an interview in July. Okay, well, they've spoken, and prognosticator of prognosticators, Dan Quayle, has gotten it wrong, to no one's surprise. All right, let's see. Let's catch up on this one, because I think this one is probably doable in a short span of time. Gosh, we're just drowning in stories here. There are so many. Let's keep it relatively short with this one, just keep you up to date on this prior to, since it's Tuesday, just prior to tomorrow's visit, expected visit with Joan McCarter. We'll probably discuss this one a little bit more. Bipartisan majority, it says could have stopped, and I think by now has, in fact, worked together to stop the House IRS impeachment vote. Roll call had this one. Subheader, by the way, many in the GOP said to have lingering concerns about process. They're learning about process. Lindsey McPherson wrote this one. Weeks of Republican infighting over whether the House should move to impeach IRS Commissioner John Koskinen. I still hope I'm getting that right. Could have ended last Thursday with a vote to table the impeachment resolution. I guess it probably did end on Thursday. We had more than enough votes, more than sufficient to table the motion. Oh, I guess it didn't come up because they hinted that they had those things. That's what Charlie Dent says in an interview. The Pennsylvania Republican and House Democratic Whip Steny Hoyer of Maryland had led a bipartisan effort to ensure that there would be enough votes to prevent an up or down vote on the impeachment resolution. But last Wednesday night, just hours before the anticipated floor showdown the next day, Judiciary Chairman Robert Goodlatte of Virginia and Freedom Caucus Chair Jim Jordan of Ohio cut a deal to delay a full House vote while the Judiciary panel hauls Koskinen in to testify under oath. The deal is a big win for due process, the reason most members, including Dent, give for not wanting the floor vote, but it only postpones the inevitable defeat of the impeachment resolution. There simply aren't 218 members of Congress who believe there's a strong enough case to impeach Koskinen, although some Republicans are hesitant to say that publicly. The hearing scheduled for Wednesday may change some minds, but it's unlikely to sway enough votes in favor of impeachment. Had the resolution been called up last Thursday, Dent and Hoyer said there would have been more than enough votes to table it, a procedural move that would have signaled the House had no interest in pursuing impeachment. Democrats were expected to vote unanimously in favor of tabling, that's what Hoyer says, noting that he was pretty confident that more than 50 Republicans would have joined them. Dent declined to specify how many Republicans had committed to vote to table, but said, I believe we needed 32 and we had considerably more than that. Dent said his major concern in working to prevent a vote on the impeachment resolution was due process. He didn't want to set a precedent for taking an impeachment vote at any time without the Judiciary Committee having formal proceedings in which both the prosecution and defense got to bring in witnesses and present their cases. Many of our Republican prosecutors had very serious reservations about how this was going to be handled, Dent said. They were worried about their elections as well. It became clear to me that House Republican leadership was not interested in getting involved in this fight despite their preferred outcome, Dent said in explaining his decision to explore whether his colleagues would support a procedural motion to table or refer the impeachment resolution back to committee. Hoyer got involved around the end of August when it became clear to him that the Freedom Caucus was determined to force a floor vote. I knew just from talking to my friends on the Republican side that there were a large number of Republicans, overwhelming in my opinion, that felt this impeachment was not justified by the facts. So Hoyer decided to engage his whip team, particularly members who had close ties with Republicans, like Representatives Kristen Sinema of Arizona and Beto O'Rourke of Texas, in testing out that theory. Dent said Republicans were also considering a motion to refer the resolution back to committee, but Hoyer admits Democrats would not have supported that. We thought we ought to take this issue on its substance and dispose of it, Hoyer said, and tabling it would have disposed of it. Yes. Of course, just voting no on it probably would have done the trick too, but on the substance, anyway, if that's what you want to claim. Sinema said she'd talked to about 20 of her Republican friends, and that's in scare quotes, by the way, to see where they stood and got a mix of responses. Some did not want to have the vote, some did, while others were open to a vote but wanted a hearing first. While noting that it's not unusual for her to talk to Republicans, she acknowledged the significance of the larger effort, having Republicans and Democrats working together, like Mr. Hoyer and Mr. Dent, who were working together on this, doesn't happen every day. She said, the Freedom Caucus is still committed to seeing a floor vote on impeachment. While some of them may be willing to wait until after the election, Kansas Representative Tim Hillskamp is weighing whether to force a vote sometime this week. You can't. You won't. I mean, you can. That's true. I should say you can make a privileged motion for that at any time. It's just a matter of your own team will hate you. They do not want to take that vote. They don't think it's a good idea prior to this election. And due process is a great excuse for that. You don't just spring impeachment because you're angry about something. And besides which, it doesn't look very smart in that the guy you're impeaching didn't have anything to do with the thing you're angry about. It just makes you look dumb and vindictive. And frankly, it wouldn't be all that difficult to convince people that the reason you were doing it was because you are in fact angry at IRS treatment of Donald Trump instead. I mean, it's a lie, but what the hell? Go for it. I encourage it. I literally do. All right. Anyway, if they decide to try and force a vote, Hoyer said he believes the votes to table the resolution will still be there, as the facts will not have changed after Wednesday's hearing. His estimate of the well over 50 Republicans who would have voted to table is far less than what he believes actually oppose the impeachment. I believe the majority of Republicans think impeachment is unjustified and should not happen. That does not mean I think all of them would have voted against it, because you have some right-wing activists and most strident folks supporting it, and they don't want to tick them off. But other than that, it's damn unlikely. We'll say that. Okay, so perhaps there'll be more news about that, or we'll hear more about what's planned for the hearings. Maybe we'll discuss that a little bit tomorrow with Joan. You do have that to look forward to. And let's see, why not spend a little time on this one? I told you yesterday that there was a Jezebel piece, Get to Know Mike Pence and all of the very bad legislation he's signed. Jezebel, not a bad source or anything like that, not on my usual go-to list. And I was all set to share that one with you. For those of you who prefer the more staid approach of, let's say, a roll call, they also have a piece, this one published today. Mike Pence, a running mate with baggage. Focus on Trump draws attention away from governor's record in Indiana. And it's a pretty good sign that both roll call and its more staid approach and staid audience of pros is getting a taste of this as well. Jezebel, probably the more fun of the two approaches. Let's take that one. Stasa Edwards is the writer on this one. Earlier today, that would have been a couple days ago. This would be a rerun of a considerably older article. How interesting that would come up. We have our finger on the pulse of American politics here. This was published July 15th, just after the announcement of Pence's nomination for the vice presidential slot. Stasa Edwards put this together. You can see right from the opening line here. Earlier today, Donald Trump announced on Twitter that Mike Pence, governor of Indiana, had been chosen as his vice presidential candidate. Pence is a deeply traditional choice, standard old school Republican, hews more closely to the GOP's ideology than Trump, religious, speaks often of Christianity as a motivating force, and that he's signed controversial laws like Omnibus Abortion Bill HB 1337 and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, a discriminatory bill, you all know, that prompted numerous boycotts of the state. So this came out immediately after his nomination. And then, of course, we mentioned the fact that we wanted to discuss that. And I guess it's much on people's minds, too, because someone tweeted a link to this older article the other day. That's how I came to find it. And then we see Roll Call chiming in with a piece as well. So I guess everybody's digging up this approach now. Let's take a look at let me see what do they list in Jezebel. It's an older article, but he hasn't done anything since being nominated, so I don't think we're going to miss out on this. Let's see. Do they bullet point this thing? No, of course not. So they're not going to make it terribly easy to run down a list. Let's just read and read fast. The New York Times described Pence as a cautious choice of running mate, a political partner who is unlikely to embarrass Mr. Trump, well, too late for that, and who may help him shore up support among conservative voters still wary of his candidacy. Nope. No doubt that Pence is the standard Republican issue variety, religious, anti-gay, pro-life, and pro-open trade. His tone and political ideologies seem to depart from Trump on more than a few issues. Social media shows us many are quick to point out where Pence clearly departs from Trump, including bans on Muslim immigration and Trans-Pacific Partnership. All right. Let's see. If you're not going to bullet point these things or make it that much more entertaining than the roll call piece, I guess we'll just jump in between the two of these things. We've heard lots, and since we're running out of time, let's skip down to here. We've heard lots about the legislation he's signed. Roll call has an interesting subsection here called an overlooked past. Pence's past has been overlooked due to one simple reason, according to Robert Schmuel, a professor of American Studies and Journalism at the University of Notre Dame. Trump sucks the oxygen out of any environment in which he is breathing. That's the problem. We've got to stop his breathing. All one has to do is look at the coverage of the campaign, and quite frankly, Trump is always in the top position and gets an inordinate amount of attention. By running for vice president, Pence has been able to hurdle the problem he would have faced here in Indiana, that is, not getting reelected, and present himself to the country as the calm, well-spoken running mate of the often outrageous standard-bearer. Pence raised eyebrows once more in 2015 after the Indianapolis Star, that's good slurring there by me, discovered his intentions to create a news bureau. How about this one? Called Just In, Indiana. Remember that one? Just In. Get it? That was actually kind of clever. But we mentioned this when it happened. It would be overseen by his administration and hire a managing editor to assist in the production of news stories. Despite quickly abandoning the plan, Pence's project set the media world ablaze and drew comparisons to the government-backed news outlets in communist countries. He also caught flack for his efforts to stop the resettlement of Syrian refugees in Indiana, which was eventually rebuffed by a federal judge. Also for his support for legislation that limited abortions, and for attempting to curb the power of his state's publicly elected superintendent of public instruction, Democrat Glenda Ritz. The governor does maintain some ardent support in the state, however, particularly among the more rural, conservative areas. And according to some, Pence is more popular among Hoosiers than ever. Boy, do they love him in Indiana, says Rex Early, the Trump campaign's Indiana chairman. We'll see. Anyway, it is time to wrap things up for the day and to play our fantastic outro music and get ready to hand the microphone over to the guys at the after show. That gives me the opportunity to read the announcement about all the things that I meant to get to and didn't because, I don't know, because I like to wing the show. Well, I'll tell you what's coming up then on Red Sky at Morning Tuesday. That's what they call their Tuesday program. Right after this. Insisting they tried. They should be tried, probably. Insisting they tried to be reasonable. Pharmaceutical company Sarepta. Never heard of them. What are they doing? Well, they'll charge $300,000 a year for a muscular dystrophy drug that might not even work. After the FDA's pharma boss overruled her scientists and rushed approval of the drug. Well, just another one of these gougers. Unbelievable. Okay, well, they should be tried. I insist it would be reasonable to try them after that. A Phoenix Christian calligraphy studio, loses the first battle in its quest to discriminate against same-sex couples. Oh, they didn't want to do calligraphy on their invitations? Man, who even knew you had to be Christian to do calligraphy? And a right-wing Breitbart blogger loses his federal court appeal over harassment of Muslim women at Netroots Nation 2011. Wow. For the last half, they'll be visiting, of course, with Chris Reeves, who you may know as Tom Servo 433, for all of his political news, views, and election
From
strategy.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Okay, again, thanks again for listening. Thanks again for all of you for your continuing support, especially those of you who have joined the monthly contributions at Patreon and at PayPal. One of these days I should just read off a list and tell you the names of all these fantastic people, although I don't want them targeted by deplorables, so we'll keep it secret for a while. I'll see you tomorrow.